Greetings, brothers and sisters. Suckers. You guys are suckers. He's getting rid of his Make America Great Again hat. What's that say on it? Make American Zog again? I don't know what that's. Is that the right thing? It looks like Zog again. I don't know what that stands for. I hope it's not racist or anti-Semitic. But, you know, this is. I had these Facebook friends who were like truthers, and they all disappeared, and now they've returned. And, people are upset about Trump's stance on Israel. The problem with Trump has been he's not a deep person. He's a very superficial person. So he kind of understands his base. Like he's not a right-wing person. He hobnobbed with the Clintons. He had liberal friends. He's promiscuous, cheats on his wives. And so the guy isn't, a right-wing Christian. But he understands his base. He understands what they want to hear to some extent. But he doesn't go in depth in terms of when he tries to pander to the truthers or pander to the QBs or pander to these groups. He gets it at a very superficial level. But he doesn't understand how people in the truth community feel about Israel and some of these other, aspects of what he's doing here. And that he's going completely against everything he says he stands for. Because he's a superficial, surface-dwelling person. He's not a person that digs down deep, deep research. I'm going to go do deep research. He's not one of those persons. He hears something, and he makes his opinion and based on limited information. And you can see it in everything he does back from The Apprentice. He'd make these arbitrary decisions. If you watch The Apprentice, I was a fan of The Apprentice show. I saw multiple seasons of it. And, I got rid of my TV, but I probably would have watched all the seasons because you could see how arbitrary it was. In fact, the producers, people on the Apprentice that made the show said that he would fire people that didn't deserve to be fired for random reasons. Like he wasn't watching the show. And the whole show, they did these tasks. They would compete. And these people would be superstars, in the task. They do really well, and he'd fire them. He just, whatever arbitrary, he'd get a little detail here or something would rub him the wrong way. And they said they had to go back and re-edit the episodes to give Trump justification for firing people. Because oftentimes it was just so arbitrary. And so that's the problem with him. And he also thinks that you just tell people what they want to hear and then they'll, be in your hip pocket and they'll go along with everything else you believe or do. And, that's just not the case. And, when he doesn't have to appease his minions anymore, he doesn't have to appease his Trump supporters because he's not running for re-election. I mean, he needs the poll numbers to stay good, because once he loses his favorability, then it becomes harder. The mandate disappears. But, he's thinking he's got a mandate. He really kind of only sort of does. But this is a huge thing here. Like, this is a classic, a great comment here, for whatever it might be. Zionist again. Zog. Make America Zionist again. And so, Make America, Make America, is that an O? Zionist again? I guess that was what it would be. So that would be an A? I don't know. Whatever. So that's, whatever that means, right? Okay, so I looked it up. Zionist occupation government conspiracy theory. So that's what ZOG means. And so that's, The other thing was that I didn't open up Facebook. I read my messages. And I just looked at my Facebook page, and this was the thing that was on it. Like I didn't scroll through Facebook. So that, they recommended this. This was like their, whatever they, and I haven't said anything. In terms of my Facebook, they shouldn't know any of my beliefs about Trump and Zionism. I have a couple of subscriptions to not subscriptions, whatever you do. I've liked, I guess it is in Facebook, some things that It's like Jewish people for Palestine or things like that, right? There's these, and then I mean, years and years ago, like I don't see that much stuff from them posting because of Facebook's restrictions, but all of a sudden now Facebook's allowing all this kind of content, and they decided to recommend this thing to me. So, there's that. And then there's Kanye West. And so he tweeted this yesterday. He got into it with some people about his wife. And I have dominion over my wife. This ain't no woke ass feminist shit. She's with a billionaire. Why would she listen to any of you dumbass broke bitches? People say that the red carpet look was her decision. Yes, I don't make her do nothing she doesn't want to do, but she definitely wouldn't have been able to do it without my approval, you stupid ass woke pawns. I have no respect or empathy for any one living because no one living can fuck with me. But I do love some people and I give them favor. He's got off the rails with his stuff with his wife. I like his performance art stuff, if that's what you could call it. But, this isn't being a feminist or woke. It's just abusive. And she clearly is not doing this on her own. She didn't decide to go, I'm going to be naked at the Grammys. She didn't say, I'm going to take off my clothes at the Grammys, right? Like, that's not, This is all stuff. Every time she does something like that, she's with him. She doesn't do it on her own. You don't see her walking around the streets naked like she's some nudist or something, exhibitionist. And I think she's kind of shy. I think I've maybe heard her talk because I looked it up, like some old interview she did or something. But she's, she doesn't. I don't think she has a social media platform, and she's doing anything on her own, right? It's all on Kanye's thing, So there's that. But so then there was Don Lemon reacted to this. He was there. So he's doing the red carpet, and he's talking to Page Six.
He was a little short because he didn't want to do interviews, but I understand that. I've had tough interviews before. I've interviewed presidents who were mad at me. So I don't know, but then when he got...
Okay, so what he's describing here is at the Grammys. And, Don Lemon has been reduced to a guy who had his own primetime show on CNN and was making, millions of dollars a year for God knows why. What was horrible at his job. To where he's, an internet, I don't know, somebody who used to be famous, and kind of doing something that's opinionated news or commentary on the news, sort of like what I do or so many other people do. And he started off with, an audience from his show, but a small one. And Kanye West knows who he is and has judged. I mean, this is the kind of person that Kanye West, the way that the thing went down with Elon Musk, right? All that stuff. So he's aware of who Don Lemon is. And Don Lemon shouting at the back of his head wasn't why Kanye West got mad at him. He doesn't respect the guy, right? Like, he didn't want to interview with the guy because he's horrible. And, he gets fake, the guy's, not only was he bad at his job and when he was at CNN, but what he's doing now is so much worse. And so, he has no idea. Don Lemon's so clueless about what people think about him. He can't perceive. I mean, probably he wouldn't be able to get out of bed. He'd have to sit in his bed in the fetal position if he realized what people thought of him, what the reality of smart people think, people with critical thinking skills think of him. I mean, even in his own business. He has no idea how clueless he is, right? And that's why it makes him clueless. The inability to self-perceive, that's what makes him, be this clueless, because when he has no idea. He's clearly, either he's a great actor and he's playing a character, or he's just this clueless. And I think he's just this clueless.
On social media and then called me, the C word. I was like, come on, man. Come on. We're both black men,
Come on, man. We're both black men. What does that even mean, Don? Why would that be your defense? He calls you that for a reason. And, the reason would be something that you wouldn't be able to assess because of your cluelessness, right? There's people who nobody likes them, and you ask them why people don't like them, and they say, oh, they're jealous of me, or some whatever reason they make up, right? And, it's good to know why people don't like you. Like, I know why people don't like me. Just because I've interacted with my brother, and, I've interacted with other members of my family, and we share characteristics, even my kids to whatever extent, right? There's genetic characteristics. There's the family I grew up in. There's the people I hang out with, and I understand why that people don't like me, because I don't like people like me, right? And so I get it. Like, I could list the various ways that I come across that is off-putting to people. And, some of those things I've worked on changing at different times in my life. But, it's what I've settled on here, like my personality and who I am or whatever. It's just, at this point, I just got to roll with it, right? But I understand, like, I'm not oblivious to why people dislike me. Like, no one's going to tell me something I don't already know about, why people might react to me one way or another.
What that word means in our community, like, have some respect.
Yeah, least, and I know there was like conflicting reports. Did they get escorted out? Did they not? Where did that come from, do you think, being there on the ground?
I think here's what I think happened. When I posted on social media, I was talking about what people at the Grammys were saying, that they were kicked out. But I didn't see any of that. I think people saw Kanye wanted to come in, he just wanted to do the red carpet, and when they saw security walking out with them, they were thinking they were being escorted out or asked to leave. They were being escorted out, but with the proper security that would walk any, celebrity or high-profile personality.
The thing is, Kanye should have been kicked out, and we get more into it. I'm going to cover some of the things that he did. He went on this rant. He was saying stuff about Nazis, how he was a Nazi, and he said a bunch of stuff. I'm not going to read those things today. I don't know if I can either, so they're pretty offensive, even with the, they're going to be offensive to even YouTube's more lenient community guideline stuff. But I am going to show you other things about his wife that he said. And, his wife took off her clothes in a public place, right? Like, there's laws against that shit, and there's, just common decency. And in most places, you would get kicked out for that, right? It's something you shouldn't do. And, she didn't do it because she wanted to, right? It's all Kanye. So they should have gotten kicked out. I mean, it's just basic, like, etiquette. Like, you shouldn't be able to take off your clothes at some place unless you're a strip club or something. Unless you're a place where that's permitted. And the Grammys isn't one of those places, right?
So I think that's probably what happened.
Yeah. And out of all your years covering carpets, doing interviews, have you ever experienced anything like that at the Grammys?
Not at the Grammys. But look, you guys, I'm old enough to remember when people used to streak back in the 70s. All kinds of crazy things would happen. So, look, Kanye's a master marketer. He's a master promoter. So I'm surprised, but not surprised. I'm not surprised that he pulled a stunt. I'm just surprised that, there was a lot of nudity involved.
You shouldn't be surprised. He's interviewing with Page Six. He's about to give the microphone back. Page Six has been covering this for about a year, about how her family is concerned, and it's a Svengali kind of abusive situation. Like she's been cultified, right? Like she's in some sort of cult, and so cult of Kanye, and all the things that have gone on with him, and they don't think she's happy. They don't think she's eating properly. Like he's controlling her diet. I mean, we saw the same thing with Corey Feldman. Corey Feldman had these Corey's Angels. He took these, aspiring celebrities, these women who were part of his band, and he would train them and show them how to make it in Hollywood and get them connected. And he made them dress in lingerie all the time. It was he appeared on a reality show, and he made them be vegetarians so that they would lose weight. They would stay skinny, while he ate like gross foods or whatever, like cheesecake and shit. And so, very similar kind of thing. And so he's in Corey Feldman land. Okay, so got some other stuff to get to. Jake Tappers gives advice to CBS. It does the headline, and it seems like John Bolton's against this Israel thing. John Bolton's the biggest neocon, pro-Israel, pro-Iranian warmonger, and he's even... I haven't seen any of the video clips, but that's coming. And so I had this up for 3 or 4 days. I wanted to make this the beginning of a video because it's just going to be great. Lemon drop, did Democrats fail Kamala Harris? And all these other things happen, so I haven't been able to cover this. But let's see what he says here.
Moderated a forum with the candidates running to be the new chair of the DNC. You may be asking, well, exactly does the DNC chair do? Well, the chair...
Well, what they do is they take massive amount of donations and somehow leave the DNC in debt every 4 years when they run for president. So the DNC is always in debt after the election, even though they had all this money. They end up not stiffing people, not being able to pay their bills. They get hacked a lot, and they rig the primary for anybody but Bernie Sanders and for Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. So that's their job description, if you want to do those things.
Is the Democratic National Committee's top executive. The job is part cheerleader, it's part fundraiser, it's part recruiter, and it's part spokesperson. It is a very visible role when a party no longer occupies the White House, since the president is obviously the de facto leader of his or her own party. So the DNC chair will effectively become the top Democrat in the country, even if they don't actually serve in the government, okay? It's an extremely important role, and
No, it's not. We know it's just...
thought that Jonathan and Jen and Simone, they did a fantastic job asking the candidates about their platforms as well as their visions for Democrats' future, because that future is far from clear right now. Departing DNC chair Jamie Harrison is the only leader in decades from either party to enter the position with their team having the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and then leave with it having lost all three. Now,
good job, bro.
Now, there is so much more that we could talk about with this forum. From our friend Marianne Williamson really showing up and bringing the heat, to Bernie Sanders' former campaign manager Fayez Shaikh saying that Democrats need to stop making so many commitments to so many identity groups. That was interesting. It was honestly a fascinating conversation. But there was one moment that I really want to hone in on, and I want you to pay attention. Here it is.
How many of you believe that racism and misogyny played a role in Vice President Harris's defeat?
Are you serious? Are you fucking serious? This is why the Democrats, I don't know how they ever recover if that's their attitude. You think it was about racism and misogyny? When she ran for president, and I've said this so many times, like every time I've talked about Kamala Harris, I couldn't believe that they picked her for this role because they knew Joe Biden was going to be, they knew he had Parkinson's. They knew he had dementia because I knew it, so they knew it. Like they had tested him, they had seen it. Barack Obama didn't want him to run in 2016 when they chose Hillary Clinton. And so 4 years later, and being out of the government for 4 years, he took 4 years, he retired. He was done, right? He didn't run for Congress. He was done after being vice president. He had retired, right? He was, his son they had rolled in some money, they had whatever. Those people who are vice presidents they're not as monetizable as a president, but he still was going to have speaking engagements, whatever it was, right? But he was done, and they exhumed the guy, even knowing that he was mentally, deteriorating, and they forced him on the American people, and he was polling higher than Kamala Harris and various other African American candidates, Cory Booker or whatever it was, right? And he was beating them with the black community because of being connected to Obama. And the black community didn't like Kamala Harris. They were already, and women didn't like her. She polled under 1%. She lost to Marianne Williamson. She lost to Tulsi Gabbard. She lost to all these people. Nobody liked her. They didn't like her. So they promoted her forever. They rolled her out of San Francisco as, all these gifted positions she got for getting on her knees. She didn't win it because people liked her. She was just an unlikable candidate. And she got, these positions based on her sexual relationship with a guy who was 60 and she was 28, 29. He was 61 when he was going through a divorce, right? That whole thing. And she got all these positions based in that relationship. And then all the other things that went with it later on. And, in terms of being, even after they no longer were together, she was his, one of the people that had his back, right? So he's put his people into these positions. This guy was a kingmaker in California. And that's why she got the position she did. Ran unopposed in these elections. She skirted the rules, did a bunch of immoral shit, some of it illegal, unethical. Like there was a story that came out that there was a limited amount of money that you could spend, and she was running against two other candidates, and they only were supposed to spend like $250,000 or something. That was their limited budget. So she agreed to that. Then she spent $600,000 to win that election, and then did some like slandering of the other. It was just gross stuff that she did, right? But she was unlikable. Everyone understands she's unlikable, right? She's 100% not fucking a person that could win president. She didn't have it in her, and she was not. She didn't speak well. I mean, she had issues. She rambled. All the things that we saw, like all the things we know about Kamala, and they handpicked her. And they handpicked her because Joe Biden said he was going to run with a woman, and they said, well, why not a woman of color? And he picked her because he knew they were going to try to get rid of him at some point. So he picked the most unlikable person that didn't even primary. She didn't even make it to New Hampshire. She was polling at 12%, and then people took a look at her and said, all the things that we've said. I've showed you the clips before, her laughing at Joe Biden, and her and Cory Booker couldn't believe that they were losing to him, the African American community. I've showed you that clip over and over again. And so we all know why she lost, and the campaign was run into the ground. She lost because she was supposed to lose. I mean, the only reason to handpick her to do this, because at some point Joe Biden was either going to have to step down as president or he wasn't going to be able to run. And she was going to be the person they targeted. And again, they could have primaried Joe Biden with other candidates and it wouldn't have been her. And so they totally picked her. And they picked her knowing that the economy was shit, that people were pissed off that Joe Biden was senile for a long time and the Democrats didn't acknowledge it, and that pretty much everything but abortion, all the other issues went against her, and that nobody liked her. So the only reasonable explanation is they were rigging it for Trump, right? Trump was supposed to win. And so this is like silly.
Okay.
Every single candidate raised their hand. Everyone. Every single one of them. They all endorsed the notion that racism and sexism played a significant role in Kamala Harris's loss.
And that's what's going to cost you the next election. But, Trump is going to really have to run the country into the ground, and he's well on his way,
now,
for you to have any chance, because, the attitude is, the wrong attitude.
This may surprise you. This may even shock you. But if I were on that stage, if I were running to be the DNC chair, I may not have raised my hand. Let me tell you why, okay? So clearly,
even Don Lemons is the voice of fucking reason.
Harris had to deal with racism and sexism, obviously. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance said things about her that they would never say about a white male Democrat or just a white male in general ever, okay? Trump repeatedly called her lazy, he called her stupid, he called her low IQ, all, of course,
all the stuff that he said about Joe Biden. You're minimizing Trump's ability to insult people. Everything that he just said, he said about Jeb Bush. He said all these things: low energy, lazy, low IQ, stupid. How many people did he call stupid? He calls people stupid. The one thing that Trump says about women is he calls them nasty. She's nasty. That's the one thing that he says different about women. Oh, she's so nasty. She asks a nasty question. Oh, you're so nasty. He doesn't say that about men, but I'm sure that he says things about men he doesn't say about women. But Trump's ability to insult people and come up with derogatory nicknames is, some of his endearing qualities and what separates him from people trying to be presidential and acting presidential and things. His lowbrow, whatever it is, right? But don't call that based on, there might be specific things he said about Kamala Harris being Indian and not being from the African American community. Some of these other things they said. But those were, they only played well with his base. He wasn't going to win independence with that. That wasn't, his big message that he one with was his big commercial, the bombshell commercial, was the one where she said she was making sure that California, the taxpayers were going to pay for a prisoner's transitional surgery. That killed her, and we know that. Like, she had to come out and say Trump, was a part of that law, that he passed that law when he was president, but that fell flat because the commercial was so well done, and nobody was going to believe that, even though it's true.
Anti-black stereotypes. He also repeatedly cast doubt on whether she even was black, suggesting that she was faking her biracial identity. Remember when she became black and all that stuff? And who can forget the times that he asserted...
What he said was she always claimed to be an Indian, and then all of a sudden she started to claim to be black, which, he said that's what he knew her as. And she has an Indian name, Kamala. Like, I know people from my meditation that are, Indian, East Indian, that have that name Kamala. It's a common name. I forget what it means, whatever it is, right? I should have looked that up. I think I do know, but I just forgot, whatever. But, that Trump saying that was him just being, it's you could call it racist, but it really wasn't. It's Trump being, he's using whatever angle he can to delegitimize her in the black community, right? That she's just a poser. That's what he's saying. She's a poser.
Asserted that she had slept her way to up California's political ladder. Yes, Kamala Harris faced a great deal of bigotry.
Okay, but you're not going to say she dated a guy like twice her age, and that guy said he gave her jobs, and they listed the jobs that were, back in the 90s, 80s, whenever she got these jobs, they were jobs that were, like, she made $450 million. She was on some committee where they gave her $70,000 for appearing at like 2 or 3 meetings. She got all these jobs from a guy who was known as a Democratic kingmaker, and she was servicing the guy, right? Kamala Harris. That's legitimate. That's not sexist. If a guy dated some woman who was powerful, dated Hillary Clinton, let's say some guy dated a 60-year-old Hillary Clinton, and that guy moved up the ranks, again, I mean, that's not what would happen because Hillary's preferences are different, but like, just as an example, you think that guy would get off scot-free for dating that frickin',
We get it. But to say that's, the biggest reason why she lost as a party leader, it's a reason, but I don't think that sends the right message here. Allow me to read you. This is a tweet from a friend of the show, Sarah Longwell, okay? Sarah writes, quote, "If Democrats continue to blame sexism and racism for Kamala Harris's defeat when it was truly the old white guy's fault, Joe Biden, they'll talk their party into never nominating a woman or a black person again. Probably no gays too. And considering that some of the party's most dynamic leaders are women, black people, Pete Buttigieg, that would be a real shame now, wouldn't it? I'm sorry. I think that is absolutely correct. I do.
Don't apologize, Don. Don't apologize for being you.
It is spot on analysis. If you're a party leader, the easiest excuse for November is that America simply isn't ready for a black woman in a position of power. It lets everyone off the hook. You don't have to...
the problem here is, and I don't know if they said that was the biggest reason. Was that what they said here? Let's go back to it. Oh, here.
Racism and misogyny played a role in Vice President Harris's defeat.
Yeah, they said it played a role. They didn't say it was the biggest reason. Don's not very, he can't hold with things. They didn't say the biggest reason. They said it played a role. Of course they had to raise their hand. You would have raised your hand too. Everyone would have, right? Because that's your worldview. And maybe it played, you could always say it plays a role. You could always say that misogyny and racism play a role in everything, right? Like if it's 2 white guys running, then you could say that, right? Because it's just, that just based it still played a role, because women aren't able to run for president would mean that there's some kind of misogyny. You could always make a claim about that, right? And there would be some like truth to it. But the whole thing is, the bigger point here is the Democrats have, they've gotten power illegitimately, because the way that they ran those, the primaries and the presidency and, the controversy around the 2020 election, and they pushed all this agenda on the American people, that they didn't want. People said we didn't want biological males going into the bathroom. And North Carolina had to make a law, and the NBA pulled their All-Star game from Charlotte, which would have been a big moneymaker, even though there's lots of Democrats in that city and area. And, the corporations were punishing North Carolina for saying only biological men can use the men's room and only biological women could use the ladies' room. And the polling on that was 60% were like a firm no to biological men going in the ladies' room. They were firm no on all of that. They were clear. It was clear the American people were like, fuck you, we're not buying into that. 23% were for it, and the rest really didn't have an opinion. So only 1/4 of the people were for it. And all the corporations and all these people forced it on the American people. And they continue to force this shit. That's why I said, let's just let it happen. And when they did, eventually people rebelled against all that shit, right? And Trump, even though he was a part of the problem, he was able to, say things that the Democrats couldn't say about it and run against this, the whole thing. And, there might be pushback and they might swing in the other direction after Trump's debacle. And the liberals might get power again. But when you misuse power and you force things on people that they're clearly against, they're going to make you pay. And if as much there's legitimacy to the elections and legitimacy to any of these things, people aren't into the Democrats and their bullshit, right? Like everyone knows, like, this is why you lost. I mean, as bad as Trump was, because Trump was, he was 52% were never Trumpers. They would never vote for Trump. And if you can't beat a guy like that, who's 52% say, I will never vote for him. 52 of the people who were voters said, we're not going to vote. I'm never going to vote for Trump. And he still ended up, obliterating you. Then, you've failed completely as a party.
Questions about, let's say, ad spending or campaign strategy or whether Harris should have gone on Joe Rogan. You don't have to answer those questions. You just say, America is bigoted. And then you just wash your hands clean of the situation, okay? But
if Harris went on Joe Rogan, it would have been horrible because she can't have a conversation. And she had, Trump could just be himself and Kamala Harris couldn't. She had to be this construct like all these politicians. And so the whole thing was, this is why she had no chance of winning. She would never be president. Kamala Harris was never going to be president. It was very clear after the election what happened, and they laundered money. They stole all this donor money. I mean, the Democratic Party should cease to exist after their performance. Like, it's so bad. The Democratic the people who who are Democrats or who voted for Kamala Harris or or anti-Trump people, they should just say, hey, we need to form another party. You guys are just horrible. But the two-party system, they have it rigged so they can always, and after Trump destroys the country, there's going to be an alternative, which will be the Democrats, and people will have to go back, hold their nose, and go back and vote for Democrats. That's why the system sucks, and voting's a joke.
Then think about the implications of that. Think about what Sarah said here. If Democrats walk away from this moment thinking that Harris failed simply because of discrimination.
But they didn't say that. They said played a part in it. Okay, so you missed out. Like, he talks about things where he doesn't make the distinction of, they said they didn't say it was even the biggest reason. They said, did it play a role? And that role could be insignificant. Like, he just doesn't get it, right? So this is Don Lemons. I mean, he's just clueless. You can see in this, he's clueless here. Okay, so this is Elizabeth Warren. And this was recommended to me by Twitter, and I played it, and then a video that I thought was part of it came on, and that video was from Elon Musk, and I'll show you that as well. But triggered me to say, to think of giving a little bit of an audio about the left-right paradigm and stuff that you guys probably know but maybe don't think about, or this might be for other people that you're hoping to wake up. You won't, but it'll be a way that you could show them something of mine that would simplify an understanding of what's going on here. So this is Elizabeth Warren I don't know if she's trying to run for president again, and she's trying to stand out, and she doesn't want to be seen as a dial-tone, mild-mannered woman. But she breaks Senate protocol here. There's Bernie Sanders.
Ms. Warren.
Pursuant to Rule 12, no debate is permitted during a vote. The senator will suspend.
Okay, so her and Bernie are senators from New Hampshire. These are Minnesota people here. I think that's how it goes. I don't know. But either way, she's trying to act like she's the tough guy. And so that bled into this other video. I thought it was part of the same thing. It took me a while to find it, but it was an Elon Musk video.
I keep waiting and waiting and waiting for Democrats to start fucking redeeming themselves. And every single time I turn around, they make it fucking worse. Just 100%, no turnabout rate, nothing. It is just going downhill for.
So this video started to play, and then I had some thoughts about it, because obviously somebody either pretending to be unhinged, emotional about something that's, who really gives a shit about this, right? So if this is a Republican person, who I believe it is, I don't know, I've never seen her before. She's using some sort of filter on TikTok. Why is she upset that the Democrats are failing? Would you be happy about it? That means that they'll be out of power again. You wouldn't be upset about your competition failing. People like rants and emotions. Like I talk very calmly and slowly. Like I talk way slower here than I talk. I choose my words more carefully. It's just a different vibe I have than if I was having a conversation with somebody. But, in the Sajmark system, God is subtle. That the way to achieve God is through subtle means. And that whole idea is of being subtle, right? But in the world of the internet and American pop culture and all of it, it's about explosiveness. It's about anger and hostility and rants and these things, right? And that's why I don't I don't do those kind of things, because it's just artificial. And why would anybody be upset about the Democrats imploding? It benefits you. Like your competition failing benefits you, right?
For the Democrats, dude. Can you please tell me if someone, right, robbed a fucking bank? Okay, let's talk about a hypothetical before we get into the real shit real quick.
Okay, let's do that. Angry, fake red-haired girl.
If someone robbed a bank, someone watched the security footage, saw who robbed the bank, told you who robbed the bank, you caught who robbed the bank, are you going to be mad at the person that robbed the fucking bank or the person that told you were being robbed? Okay, that's what's going on with Elon Musk right now.
Is it? That's what's going on with Elon? Is that what's going on with him?
For those of you that don't understand, okay, Elon Musk was hired for the Department of Government Efficiency. What does the Department of Government Efficiency do? What is its main number one goal?
Is it about making the government efficient? I mean, that's just in the title.
To make sure that our government is running efficiently, dumbasses.
She's like some kind of a really out of control kindergarten teacher. She's like a kindergarten teacher who's lost it, who got her tongue pierced, and
and here you are, literally trying to shoot the fucking messenger because he is showing you that a lot of our money is being wasted on shit that is not needed. What type of fucking transgender opera do you need overseas? What type of all of these DEI inclusivity programs do you fucking need to be spending our money on overseas?
Okay, so let me switch over to a voiceover here. So before I switch over to a voiceover, this video came up, and then it disappeared, because that's what happens on Twitter, and there's no history, and I'm like, how am I going to find that video? And so I searched for the Elizabeth Warren, and I found there was just this 9-second clip. And so I thought they were part of the same video. I thought she was responding to Elizabeth Warren, but it was just an autoplay thing, right? And so I searched for it. I had no idea who that girl was. So then I hit the tab on my phone, recommended for you, and it was the first thing that popped up. And it was from Elon. So Elon's promoting this thing. So then I had to switch over to my computer and go to Elon's page, and this clip was from 2 days ago. And he must have 150, 200 posts conservatively that I had to scroll through to get to it. Like, he's just almost like unhinged on his own Twitter, and most of it has to do with this stuff, right? And then I was eating lunch, and I combed through the news channels. I went through MSNBC, CNN, and Fox. And they were all talking about this. This is the new big subject, Elon Musk and all of this, right? Of course, Fox was supporting him, and the other two channels weren't. So this is the issue du jour, right? I caught the tail end of a panel that was discussing Elon Musk, and some woman said, remember, his first wife said that when they got married, he whispered in her ear and said, remember, I'm the alpha. Apparently that's what happened, according to this woman, and her, the story must have come from his ex-wife. He's got to tell his wife he's the alpha. If you have to tell somebody you're the alpha, you're not, right? But anyways, so what I want to do is respond to this whole idea, because this is where people get caught up, and it's the most simplistic game of all time, right? And so you have basically two groups of people that want to rob you. And the way that they're robbing you is, right now there's $5 trillion in tax money, tax revenue. It usually was around $4 trillion. It used to be $3 trillion, but still, no matter what, that's a lot of money. So $5 trillion, each trillion is 1,000 billion. So 5,000 trillion, is that what it is? 5,000 billion. So each trillion, 5,000 trillion would be, 5 trillion would be 5,000 billion. And it would be 5 million, which is crazy to think about, right? So you would have $5 million, right? So like it's astronomical numbers. And these two thieves, the Democrats and the Republicans and the parties and all the people involved in it, want access to this money, the budget. And there's more than that, because they're going to go into debt. And so they have access to the collective monies and can spend it any way they see fit. But there's more money at stake as well, because there's lobbyists willing to pay them so that they get a piece of that money, that collective money that American taxpayers generate. And then whatever they're going to do in terms of printing money, all the debt-based shit that they're going to do. And so there's all this money that's out there to purchase the rights to this other money, the collective money, the lobbying money and all the other things, corporate money, all these things. And there's power to go with it. The world's best military and all these other things that go with it, all the governmental power and things like that. So these two groups of thieves are both wanting to have control over that, right? That's why they're trying to get elected. The corruption is inevitable. Even an honest person is going to be corrupted by the level of power you have, money power and governmental power and military power, all these different powers. And the right to impose laws, sanctions on people, and what you can do as a governing official. All the things that they can do. The appointments of different positions and things that they have control over, the presidency and all the positions Trump's appointing, these various agencies, and then all the things that they can do. All this power that they have, which is, an immense amount of power that is all monetizable. And so, of course, people are going to both want to get access to that money and misuse it and take care of the people that pay them. And corruption is inevitable, right? And so that's why there can never be real democracy when you're talking about that much power and that much money, because the honest people are going to get steamrolled and devoured by the sociopaths. It's just how it would be. It's a system like this. It's rigged for that to happen. And so both sides are trying to tell you how bad the other side is, because what they want you to think is one side is the criminals and one side is the good guys, because this is this binary way you've been taught to think since you were born. Like this, every movie and TV show has a hero and a villain. There's the good guys and the bad guys, and the good guys always win. And so they want you to think that there's good guys in this situation, and there's no good guys. How could there be fucking good guys when there's that much money and power at stake? How could they be good guys? How could there be some guys who are really bad and some guys a little less bad? They all have to be really fucking bad because they want access to this money and power. And people who want that are always bad people. And you can say they're using this power for good, but people who crave power and crave wealth like this, hoarding wealth, they're always bad people. They're always deficient. They're always lacking something. They're always disconnected from God. They're always looking for something in the power and the money that doesn't make them happy or doesn't justify their existence. It's not part of their soul process. Only from a learning standpoint, that you have to have these positions to realize that this isn't why you're here. Whether you believe in past lives and future lives, just consider this. Let's say there's such a thing as past lives, just for argument's sake, if you don't want to believe in it. If you were going to live various lives, you would probably come in as a poor person first. You would be your first time as a human being, right? You'd be a novice. You'd be a beginner. You're not really sure. Let's say you came up from the animal kingdom, the transmigration of souls. The previous life, you were a dog or a cow, an animal that was domesticated around people, and you moved up, like after a series of lives or whatever. And you still have animalistic tendencies. You don't have the ability for abstract thought. You're still, kind of living very poor, primitive lives, which you see people do. And you start looking up to people who are kings, wealthy people, and thinking, oh my God, if I had that, if I was one of those people, I would really make it. Like that would be what you would see, right? You would see that people who above you on what you would see a hierarchy of evolution are people who are successful, rich, successful, famous, because everyone looks up to these people, and especially primitive-minded people who don't have an understanding of God or abstract idea of God. And so you would aspire to, especially if you lived in abject poverty, you'd aspire to be these people. And so then you would incarnate maybe the next life or life after that as one of these powerful people. Maybe you'd move up you keep on moving up in terms of your evolution. And then you get these positions and you realize you're stressed out and miserable and you're hurting other people and you feel bad about it, even if you don't realize it. And you're miserable and you're like, this isn't it. And then you would start, contemplating your existence and the existence of God, and then you would go a different path, right, in terms of your future lives. And so you could say that these positions, there's some, merit or benefit that you would learn about, that wealth and power isn't, the reason for your existence. But there are some people that they're like, well, I guess this is the best I'm going to do, and they just incarnate over and over again, and they never get back on track, right? So let's just, you can take that as whether you believe that or not. There's some, some logic to that. But in terms of, aside from all that, the game is won and lost by one side saying, look at how evil the other side is. And by defining the other side as the more evil side. And you can always find governmental corruption. You can always find misuse of governmental funds. And if you display them like Elon Musk and Trump are doing, it makes the Democrats look like they're horrible people, which they are, that they misused this money, which they did. And you can exaggerate things, and you can just, once you get the people seeing a few of these things and the outrage, and that immediately takes any eyes off of you, and they're like, oh, these guys must be the good guys who are cleaning up the mess, right? The whole QAnon bullshit thing was that there was this deep state, but inside the deep state, there were these good guys who were trying to get rid of the deep state, and Trump was amongst them. And even though the QAnon thing, the guy was anonymous and was obviously, the way the thing played out, it was clear that it was a governmental asset, like someone in the intelligence community that was publishing these Q posts to send these people on this wild goose chase, and which eventually ended up in the Capitol of January 6th, right? And all these other things that they did. But as long as you convince the other side is the bad guys, then that makes you the good guys, because people think that way. They think in good and bad, and if the Democrats are the evil ones, then the Republicans are the good ones. And you immediately say, all right, I can trust these guys to fix the problem because they're pointing out who the bad guys are. That's how, if you see these narratives and things, they're always telling you who the bad guys are, right? You guys remember that the Coney 2012 thing? There was this guy named Coney who was supposed to be this mass murderer, abuser of children, who was taking children into his military. They would take these kids when they were 13 years old. They found out if they They brought these kids and trained them as in military or militias at 13 years old, at puberty between the ages of, 11 and 13, 14 years old, that they would become ruthless killers for the rest of their lives because there's you're entering into adulthood and was such a pivotal time in their lives, right? And this guy, they had this Kony 2012 where they were, moving towards fixing Africa. The problem was that the other people that they were promoting were all warlords and bad people, maybe even worse than this guy, Kony. And so the guy who made the video was showing his kids, and he's like, this is the bad guy. Like he's telling his kids that, and you're watching the video. It was a video that popped on YouTube, and they promoted it, and it went up and got millions and millions of views. And then it came out that there's all these warlords. And the guy who made the video, he flipped out and started walking around naked in traffic. And he was, he posed as a family man. He was clearly gay. He was having this meltdown. You can find it on the internet. The Kony 2012, the guy's name is Jason or something. And he walks in the middle of an intersection. He's just rambling. And he had to be hospitalized. Like the whole thing imploded. It was kind of funny, but it showed you like how quickly people could be convinced somebody was a bad guy who was a bad guy and would support other bad guys or a bad government because they said, well, the other side has to be good. That's how people think. And so if you convince somebody's bad, then you're the good guy. Like if you have a choice between two people, you convince the other person that you're the other person's a bad guy, you're the good guy by default. And so that's how this thing goes. It's, Trump was the bad guy, and they convinced the Democrats. It was the same thing the Democrats fell for, that the Republicans are falling for now. And, you say, well, maybe he's not as bad or whatever. Still, that's the same kind of thing. So you think that Elon Musk is good? Does anyone really think Elon Musk is good, that weird motherfucker who's polluting the space with all these satellites for this shitty satellite internet that doesn't even fucking work? When my experience with it was horrible in terms of it just, you couldn't hold the signal, and it was like the worst kind of internet. Spotty and then inconsistent. And then all the other things he does, he wants to chip people across the board. And just the way he presents himself. Does he look like a good guy? Does he seem like a good person? When you hear him talk, do you go, this guy's a saint, this guy's connected to the divinity within him. He's somebody who's has a moral compass, right? He's none of those things. And Trump, the same way. Trump is a narcissist. He's all about himself, a sociopath, a flim-flam man. You can see it, but people don't want to see it, right? It's easy to see, but it's hard to accept because people want it out. They want to believe that there's good guys out there, that you're not being robbed, and they're just choosing their robbers, right? You're voting. I said this about the election between Biden and Trump. You're choosing the person who's going to loot the rest of the American, the American wealth, right? What's left of the American wealth, and same thing now with Trump. And so people are trusting him because, look at what the Democrats did, right? You're choosing who's going to steal from you. You're choosing your thieves of choice, right? That's all this is, And I think people would see it if it wasn't so hard to accept, because then you realize you're fucked and the system's fucked because there's only one kind of way this can end. When the people who are running your system aren't good leaders, they don't care about America, they just care about themselves. How can that end well? When they're preoccupied with lining their pockets, how the fuck are they going to make America into a good country? When they're going to try to steal as much as they possibly can that's their goal. And the other part is not getting caught. And so how is that going to work out in the government? It's not. You see what's happened. And then all the corporations and all the other various powerful entities, religious power, all of the same thing. When people are just focused on themselves and getting as much from the collective as possible, there's no way they're going to make good decisions. That's just, it should be obvious to everybody, but it's not. All right, so let's get into the other stuff here. So, a few more things from Twitter. I'll be signing an executive order next week, ending the ridiculous Biden push for paper straws, which don't work. Back to plastic. So this is pretty fucked. Now, the reason, look, Chloe in Wonderland, this has been coming up. She's the one I call the big one because she's like a foot taller. And she has her own thing that she, reason that she calls herself the big one Has to do with her vajayjay. I might as well run the meme here.
So, you guys make fun of me for having a bigger vagina than most.
Those paper stuff straws do suck, at least the ones I've tried, but there's metal straws that are good. You have to wash them. Whatever. I don't know how much that has to do with the sea turtles. I think it has something to do with sea turtles. But also, microplastics are being found in people's reproductive systems, potentially impacting declining fertility rates. It's phytoestrogens that are there. All the plastic should go. I mean, people using plastic, which we do, to store food. I mean, there's lots of things. And there's effects to it, creating, higher levels of estrogen, lower levels of testosterone, and all the aspects of it. So it's, back to plastic is not, for a guy who was claiming to be on board with Kennedy's, getting better foods and all the things that they were discussing, all that stuff that happened, which I knew Trump wasn't on board with because he just wasn't. And then he was eating McDonald's and humiliating Kennedy with that shit, right? But more importantly, do you really need an executive order for straws? Like, at some point, this is just like, he's like some king, right? Like some king just signing shit and proclaiming things. Oh, get rid of these plastic straws. Let me do an executive order. Like he's having get rid of these paper straws. Now, the reason for getting plastic straws is valid. And the reason for getting rid of paper straws is they suck, right? Which they do suck. At least some of the ones that I've tried, whatever it is. You can taste the paper and it starts, it's a bad idea because they're paper and you're sticking in them liquid. And if the paper straws have shit on it, it's going to get in the liquid as well. There's issues with it. But for him to do an executive order and this like petty thing, he's like, he's tried a paper straw. He's like, as soon as I become president, I'm getting rid of these motherfuckers, right? And so that's totally Trump here, microplastics. And the daylight savings time while you're at it. Amen. The scam plastics, everything in the ocean, on the beaches, in the gutters, and they pick up straws just to tick everyone off. Paper straws, biggest joke ever. Well, there's lots of there's places near the ocean where they won't allow you to have plastic bags at like Walmart and things like that if you're shopping there. My electric bill went from $200 to $400. Don't care about straws. This is the whatever it is. But that's Trump. Trump's anti-environment. Like he's a big fuck you to the environment, so a big fuck you to him because, we are fucking up the planet, whether you want to deal with it or not. We are making the planet worse. Where, we create toxic shit and dump it all over the place. And we use good natural resources and turn it into toxic shit. That's the hallmark of our civilization. So right below that was this ghoul.
Senator, is your head okay after that fall? Senator?
Fuck. Holy fuck. You let this fucking turtle without a shell retire, right? Like, the shellless turtle, can we finally just let him go? The guy's clueless. He's been clueless for years, right? This is your government. Like, people still are being elected and hold these positions. Remember they had to roll out that ghoul Dianne Feinstein when she couldn't even say yes, yay or nay to do a vote? And her eye was all swelling up. It was disgusting. It was hard to even look at her. Like, at some point you got to have a mandatory age limit, in terms of these guys. It makes common sense. 75, right? 70. It's just, get some. If you're this old, usually what you're voting on is past your time of understanding. You're voting for things that are you're in charge of things that are going to be for the future. And you grew up so many decades ago, and the way everything's transformed in terms of the generations have changed so much. And you got guys like this. Holy shit. Look at this.
Are you good? Senator.
You can't answer the question because look at him. Fuck. GOP leaders leave White House meeting with huge questions.
White House today, Republican leaders in the House still have not publicly revealed how they plan to move ahead with President Trump's legislative agenda. More than a dozen members of Congress were there at the White House today, where we are told the president laid out his priorities, but they did not leave with an agreement, at least not one that...
Like, something's happening right here. Watch him talk. Like, there's some kind of little something going on with, like, I don't know what's happened there.
...is clear to us on where to start. Basically, Republicans in the House have been struggling to present a united front on how to proceed with the president's agenda, while also trying to fend off an effort by Republicans in the Senate.
It's very distracting.
Go around them. My source tonight is a veteran of Republican politics in the Trump White House. He was Trump's former national security advisor, Ambassador John Bolton.
Porn stash. It's porn stash.
Ambassador, what do you make of how, we're a month into the new Congress, and it's still pretty clear that they are divided on how to proceed with Trump's agenda. And what we are told is he is not really telling them explicitly.
Okay, so let's get into the she asked him about like the stuff to do with right here. Let's go this part.
What Trump wants done, it's going to have to be legislatively.
Right. Look, executive orders really allow the president to control the executive branch of government, which he is the head of, after all, and order things that already exist.
Okay, so this guy. But let's get to the...
That happened in a debate, the Republican primary debates of the 2016 campaign, where Marco Rubio, now Secretary of State, was on stage with Trump talking about Gaza, and this is what he said.
The Palestinians are not a real estate deal, Donald.
Okay, no. A deal.
They're not a real estate deal.
A deal is a deal. Let me tell you,
a deal is not a deal when you're dealing with terrorists.
We're now hearing from Secretary Rubio.
Look at how now there's the guy who I probably dislike most in politics, the person, is this guy. I don't know if you call him a politician. The neocons were some of the worst. The wars that they did, the pain they inflicted on these people all over the Middle East and the rest of it. And they were just so wrong on every level. And this guy's the worst neocon. And his porn stash, and he's such a warmonger, all these things. And Trump brought him on board, and of course, inevitably, they turned on each other. And this guy's going to be right about this thing. If he's, I assume he is. Now, Rubio and Trump got into it. Remember, Rubio talked about Trump's little hands. Of course, Rubio's got smaller hands than Trump. I mean, he's not a big fellow. He's kind of a little fellow. And now Rubio's doing Trump's bidding just like Lindsey Graham. And they had very heated debates back in 2016. And he said, this isn't a real estate deal. And now the guy's pushing for it, which is hilarious of what's happened, how Trump's rolled over all this stuff. Look how happy he is.
Softening Trump's plan a bit for what he laid out for Gaza. But I wonder how you saw what Trump laid out.
Well, I was fascinated that when he talked about Gaza, he read from a piece of paper. That was very clear. I just love to know who wrote that piece of paper, who caused him to say the United States was going to own Gaza. Look, there are really two issues here.
So he's actually, the neocons are some of the most pro-Israeli people, pro-Israel people. And he really wants war with Iran. This guy's dream was to have war with Iran. I mean, that's what he was thinking. All these other wars, sure. I mean, they architect all those bad wars that happened before, but it was all leading up to war with Iran. And that's where him and Trump sort of agreed, with a hard line on Iran. And yet this guy's even thinking this is too much. Like he's saying that Israel puppeted Trump. Then Netanyahu wrote this down on a piece of paper and Trump read it. That's what he's implying here.
The first is, what's the U.S. role going to be post-war in Gaza? I don't think it will look anything like what Trump suggested on Tuesday night. I don't think there'd be any support for it. It'd be very dangerous in the circumstances. He doesn't want to put troops in, which wouldn't be advisable anyway. So a lot of that, I think you can just disregard. The issue, though, that is critical is whether...
You can't disregard because the president said it, and it's so fucked up, right? Of course it's not going to happen. And if it happens, the whole world's fucked. Like if something like that crazy happens, then there's lots of other problems. Like that'll be the least of our problems. If Trump says military over and just says we own Gaza, I mean, that's when the missiles start flying, like nuclear missiles start flying. Like I mean.
Other people are going to continue to insist on laying the basis for a two-state solution, which is utterly failed, utterly dead. And what's going to be done from a humanitarian point of view from the Palestinians living in Gaza who have been used for decades by radical Arab states beginning in the 50s and 60s.
Again, this guy. See how pro-Israel he is, but he even can't stomach Donald Trump's ridiculous proposal. Like, he's one of the worst of the worst. He's towing the line with this bullshit Hamas stuff and all the stuff with Palestine and getting rid of the two-state solution. It was always two states. It was a country they divided in two, and somehow Israel became a state, became a country, and Palestine didn't, and that's what's happened. And it's fucked the Palestinians forever. Okay, so finally, Droopy Dog Jake Tappers.
In our politics lead, there's a story playing out between Paramount and CBS News, President Trump, and the Federal Communications Commission that any American who values a free and independent press should care about, including Trump supporters who should not like the precedent that is being set.
Okay, so you're pretending there's a free and independent press, and that exists kind of on the internet now. It didn't for years. When you guys your company pushed to censor all the rest of us here. But, whatever. Let's just go with Droopy Dog Jake Tapper.
The story started last fall when 60 Minutes interviewed then Vice President Kamala Harris. Then candidate Trump did not agree to sit down with the news magazine, but nonetheless, he protested how 60 Minutes edited the Harris interview, specifically the answer she gave after correspondent Bill Whitaker asked the vice president why Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was not listening to the Biden administration. Now, in a preview clip that ran on CBS's Face the Nation Sunday morning, Harris was shown answering like this.
The work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or
Remember this way she had of talking, where she would just be, you couldn't follow her because she wouldn't say anything specifically. It's just this politically correct kind of speech or talking in vague terms without ever answering the question. And this killed her in, the debates and that look she gave Trump. Remember when everyone said she won the debate because of the way that she looked at Trump and all the stuff? And as clearly as she didn't. Like that look she gave him, that bitchy look that she gave him, but also these types of answers. She can't answer the question. And she was in a situation where answering the questions truthfully would have to hammer Joe Biden in herself. I mean, that was the other issue, right?
Result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But during 60 Minutes airing, Harris gave this answer to the same question.
We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Now, CBS News explained the discrepancy by saying they had merely run two different parts from the same longer answer, and that is indeed what the transcript revealed. Now, CBS News did not post the transcript at the time.
Okay, so either way, they cut out a big chunk of her answer. They edited the shit out of it, and you can say they did for time, but they also did because it made no sense, right?
But they did turn it over to the FCC this week, and the FCC released the transcript to the public yesterday. But that is far from what Donald Trump alleged happened.
They took the answer out in its entirety, threw it away, and they put another answer in.
Now, that is, as we saw from the transcript, obviously not what happened at all. But still, Donald Trump called this incident, quote, the greatest fraud in broadcast history, unquote.
Okay, so you realize he says that about everything? It's always the biggest, the greatest, the worst, He talks in absolutes. I mean, he said those things about things that he's talked about things being the worst that are similar things. And so of course he can't be taken seriously when he says something like that.
Mr. Trump said, quote, CBS should lose its license, unquote. And then Trump sued under news distortion rules for $10 billion. Now, the suit is
Go shoot for the moon, Trump.
is widely regarded by legal and First Amendment experts as, well, as one put it, quote, a frivolous and dangerous attempt by a politician to control the news media. Broadcasters have a right to edit interviews.
Yeah, but the issue here, and what Trumpers would say and truthers would say, is that the news media is completely focused on one side, not the other. Although they did help Trump inevitably because they had to. That was just, whether they intentionally did it or not. But everything was skewed against Trump, right? There was two different standards. Trump was getting completely different coverage, and you guys covered up the fact that Joe Biden was senile. This guy was one of the first people to actually talk about it. He never talked about how long the problem. I mean, he barely, scratched the surface. And so, that's the issue. The media is corrupt. And that they did that, what was the motivation to do it? Was it just to save time? Or was it because they knew that answer made her look bad and it wasn't going to help her, it was going to hurt her, and they wanted to give her the biggest fluff piece? Had Trump said something bad, they would have not only played the whole clip, but they would have promoted it all over the place so everyone would see it, right? There's definitely some kind of bias there. We all know it. Like, it's not, And it's not real in the sense that Trump still is, even with all the media bias, Trump still won the election. So that means whatever, means almost nothing. Media bias means almost nothing in terms of all this.
It's editorial judgment. For example, Fox in June 2024 aired this.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
But that wasn't Trump's actual whole answer. It was a taped interview. And as Semaphore noted at the time, Mr. Trump, in the full, unedited version, sounded a lot less definitive about releasing the Epstein files. Here's the whole answer.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I guess I would. I think that less so because, you don't know. You don't want to affect people's lives if it's phony stuff in there because there's a lot of phony stuff with that whole world.
The stuff about me in there, it's phony. Like, anything about me and Epstein is phony, even though there's videotape of us being together and me saying what a great guy he was. So, that stuff's phony.
But I think I would, or at least
Do you think that would restore trust? Help restore trust?
Yeah, I don't know about Epstein so much as I do the others. Certainly about
the others, the ones that weren't my friends, those guys that were Democrats. They were the one put shade on me.
He died. It would be interesting to find out what happened there because that was a weird situation and the cameras didn't happen to be working, et cetera, et cetera. But I'd go a long way toward that one.
Quite different, right? Now look, Fox had every right to make that edit. Now, did that edit make Trump look more decisive, less equivocating?
Okay. This whole thing's a joke. It's just the media pretending that there's standards and quality there, right? It's silly. That's Jake Tappers. Okay, so I want to wrap up this video here. This will be up on Super Bowl Sunday. I just made a video public today. And then there'll be a comment video. Not just a comment video. Somebody asked me a question about what I meant about words not mattering, and it ended up being, to me, a very profound 2-hour, discussion about some of these, things to do with my, all the things that I believe. Clarifying things because, people misunderstand stuff. And so all that's coming up. I want to end this one here. So when people are faced with a problem, like if you're faced with a problem, you have an undesirable thing in your life, right? Something you wish would just go away, something you don't want, something that, you're rejecting and you want to get it out of your life as soon as possible. This is what I was saying about prevention. People don't value prevention because you don't have the negative. But once you have the negative, you wish you'd use prevention. You're like, I wish I'd done anything to prevent this from happening, if it's a health thing or whatever. But something is a crisis, there's a problem. And you know how people act. Like we know how we've been, how we've been socialized. what we feel about any of these things, things that are painful, that like get rid of that thing. Like, can you just take this thing away, right? So this is, how the so-called pain management, OxyContin and that business, anything like that, all the painkillers, all the things that people take, psychological medications, alcohol, like, to erase these things, drugs and alcohol, self-medicating. People want to get away from their lives, their misery, things that they can't fix, things they can't solve. And so the powers that be know that, and they can present a problem, they can create a problem, they can create something you worry about. They create a problem, problem, reaction, solution. The problem's created, you have a reaction, and they give you a solution, and you'll jump at it. And Trump is that, right? So you see the problem, and some of the problems are legitimate, some of them are being, manufactured and fabricated. But this is how they'll get you to do anything. This is how they'll sell people on Agenda 31, housing, any of these things, right? Especially these young kids who don't need much space because they just need a place to live on the internet, right? They just need a good internet connection and, whatever space they need to do that, right? I mean, they need very little because they're not living material lives. But either way, there's going to be problems, there's going to be situations that occur, and then they're going to present a solution. And Trump, for some people, represents that. Elon Musk, all these other things, right? But it's just a scam. And because we know how we've been socialized and what our psychological makeup is and how we deal with problems, we want to end them as quick as possible. So as soon as you have a problem, you're looking for somebody to give you a solution. And some of these things are, beyond your ability to do anything about. So somebody like Trump comes in, there's a deep state, a falsely created problem, because the deep state as it's defined doesn't exist. It's all a deep state, right? It's either all or nothing. But there's these deep state people, but there's some good guys, and Trump's one of them, and he's going to fight off the deep state for you. You're paying him protection money. But then you find out that if anybody's involved in the deep state, it's Israel, right? Like these countries and these organizations and these institutions. And you find out that he's out there shilling for bankers, and he's out there shilling for Wall Street and these other institutions that are part of the deep state, are part of the problem. Then you realize, this guy's he's a piece of shit. He's been able to hone in and capture a problem, a desire by people to want to have some kind of thing erased, right? And then he's been able to capitalize on it. So that's all this is. I think most people can see it but don't want to, because then if you take away Trump as your savior, then what do you got? You don't have a Democrat coming in to save you. You're never going to believe that there's a Democrat. There's no independent people, because that doesn't work either. There's no government that's going to save you. So is it the corporations? Well, they're not going to save you. Is your religion? Well, certainly not. The religions are going in the wrong fucking direction. I mean, you can still believe in that shit if you already believe in it now. But if you don't believe in it, you're not going to go to that and look at it as a solution. And even if you did, it's not true. That's not going to, the religion isn't promising you anything in terms of your material life. It's promising you something after you die. And so, even if you believed in that, it's not going to fix the government. And so you think, God's going to do it. Well, why would God fix this government? Why would God want this government to survive? When you see all the evils in the system that you're documenting, when you see how corrupt the system is and how it's taking people in the wrong direction, why would God fix that, right? Why would God, wouldn't God want that to go away? It's a problem, not a, part of the solution. And so, it's just there for everyone to see. But they won't see it because once you realize Trump isn't your savior, you realize you're fucked. Like, it's just absolutely, there's nothing that can be done. The truth community isn't going to work. The truth community, in terms of this information war and this Alex Jones shill stuff, the Trump is the ultimate solution. You now have what you consider a truther that's speaking your language to whatever extent in the White House, this position of power. And so if the deep state and the evil people are going to be taken down, it's this guy. Once you realize this guy's a part of it, which it's undeniable that he is, then that's just all crumbles. And it means that all these things that you think were going to help you have failed. And so this is where people are. But, the inability to reconcile the issues here is you know, what's keeping people engaged with Trump and engaged with hope, you know, with the hopium. But anyways, you know, you guys mostly get it. Only spirituality will save this world. It's power, vital, definitely important to the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.